Buenas tardes, señoras, señores. Bienvenidos a la jornada de tarde de este primer día de Conferencia Internacional organizada por UNED-ICDE, Movilizar la educación a distancia para la justicia social y la innovación. Comenzamos la sesión de la tarde con la segunda sesión plenaria que versará sobre la mejora de las habilidades para promover el acceso a la educación a distancia y el mercado laboral. Una de las principales líneas de debate, como habrán podido observar a lo largo de las temáticas que han ido surgiendo a lo largo de la mañana. Participan como ponentes la señora Judith Zubieta, coordinadora de la Universidad Abierta y de Educación a Distancia de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, el señor Francesc Pedró, jefe de sección de asesoramiento en políticas sectoriales y tecnologías de la información y la educación en comunicación de UNESCO, Mandala Madhaniya, y me he disculpado ya previamente porque sabía que iba a pronunciar mal su nombre, Mandala, discúlpeme, rector de la Universidad de Sudáfrica, y Grace Alfonso, rectora de la Universidad Abierta de Filipinas. Modera la sesión y tiene la palabra el señor Swann, presidente de la Asociación Europea de Universidades a Distancia.
Okay. Well, welcome to you all to the second plenary of the conference on the theme of improving skills to promote access to distance education and the labour market. My name is Swann. Until December last year, I was Director of Students at the Open University, a position that I've now retired from, with more time to spend as President of the EADTU, the European Association of Distance Teaching Universities. We have a distinguished panel of speakers from 4 continents and the nations of Mexico, Spain, South Africa and the Philippines. And I'll just tell you a little bit more about them in the order in which they will speak. First of all, Dr. Judith Zubieta, whose academic field is systems engineering. She's the coordinator of the Open University and Distance Education section at UNAM, and she also, interestingly, has a special interest in promoting the role of women in science and technology. And she served as program co-chair of the Women for Science initiative at the Inter-American Network of Academies of Sciences, and she has extensive administrative experience as well within the federal government of Mexico and at UNAM. Next, Professor Francesc Pedró. Professor Pedró has led UNESCO's work on teacher development and education policies, including technology in education, since 2010. He was formerly Pro-Vice Chancellor of Educational Research and Innovation, as well as in charge of international relations at the Open University of Catalonia, and also formerly Professor of Comparative Education and Public Policies at another one of the leading universities in Barcelona. In 2005, he moved on to be Senior Policy Analyst at the OECD Center for Educational Research and Innovation. Next, I'm delighted to welcome Professor Mandala Makanya. Professor Makanya was appointed Principal and Vice Chancellor of UNISA, the University of South Africa, just over 1 year ago. His academic field is sociology, and he has served in a number of leadership roles in the South African Sociological Association. He's widely recognized as a distinguished scholar in distance education, an office holder in the African Council for Distance Education, and on the executive of the ICDE, the co-sponsor for our conference. Professor Makanya is also very active at national and international level in a number of international associations. Finally, Professor Grace Alfonso. Professor Alfonso is currently in her 3rd term as Chancellor of the University of the Philippines Open University, a post she's held since 2007. She's combined a distinguished leadership and administrative career with a professional life as a painter and a sculptor a filmmaker, director, film researcher, and a critic. She's Professor of Film and Mass Communications at the University of Philippines College of Mass Communications. And in this role, she has written academic treatises on film education and the movie and television industries in the Philippines. But she has also written and directed film and television dramas, documentaries, and educational videos, and has to her record several solo art exhibitions. I asked Professor Alonso whether she ever slept. She insisted that she did. You may also notice that Professor Alonso has a little problem with her left hand. Last Wednesday she broke a finger, and this required an operation with general anesthetic. She then travels over 2 days from the Philippines, so we are especially pleased to welcome you. The themes that the speakers have chosen to interpret the title of this session are very diverse, and I expect that we will offer you a rich and varied diet of perspectives and approaches, covering issues of international and national policy, institutional strategy, and pedagogic innovation. The presentations come from a range of political, economic, and social contexts, which will also, I think, make for a rich experience for everybody. There are so many themes that we could introduce, but let me conclude just by mentioning what I think are the two dominant themes that are likely to emerge, and they are fundamental to all debates in higher education. But I believe that open and distance learning has a particular and distinctive role to play in both of them. And they are access and graduate skills. And I'll say something very briefly by way of introduction to both. Access to the opportunities afforded by higher education and the economic, social, and cultural capital that it creates is an issue that will be raised in different ways by all the speakers. Of course, social justice is central to our concerns in this conference. What is interesting for me is that I have never actually heard anyone in the field of higher education who is not strongly in favor of social justice. But what's intriguing is that what one person thinks of as an initiative that will promote social justice can be seen by others in a different light entirely. I recently watched an interesting presentation by Sebastian Thrun, who is now the chief executive of Udacity and was the initiator of Stanford's first MOOC. He spoke with great conviction and passion about his belief that the MOOCs that he's offering to the world are a tool to widen access to higher education. But we also know that there is in the open and distance learning world a concern that the principal beneficiaries of the new generation of MOOCs that are making so much noise at the moment may be the elite universities of the developed world rather more than the students who take them. Indeed, it's possible that both of these positions may have some claim to the truth. So the question for us is, what are the strategies and actions that we should take that will maximize social justice, and what can we do to promote these as against other less effective strategies and actions? And then my second theme, graduate skills. The concept of graduateness that we should pursue nationally and institutionally is my concern. So what are the essential competencies that we should foster in our students, and to what purpose? How are the skills needed by graduates in the 21st century different from those that were expected in the last part of the 20th century? Where should the balance lie between skills that will support national economic prosperity and those that will enable active citizenship and participation in civil society? Indeed, is there a tension or not between notions of employability and notions of democratic, social, and cultural participation as we develop our curriculum? And for us at this conference, a key question is, what distinctive offer can open and distance learning institutions make to potential students about the competencies that are particularly promoted through the pedagogies and the student experience that we offer, as distinct from the offer of conventional universities. So finally, just to explain that the format is that each speaker will address you for 15 minutes, and I have their permission to give them a little piece of paper when they have 2 minutes left, and then they'll speak in series, and then we hope that we will have a good time at the end of the session for discussion. Now, one final thing, I noticed that you are, as I suppose is appropriate for institutions of distance learning, quite a widely dispersed audience. Now, if you would like at this point to come closer to the front, where interaction may be slightly easier, please feel free to do so. But if you are comfortable sitting at a distance, as our students all are, then you're very welcome to stay there. So can I now invite Dr. Zubieta to present to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Swann, for this very nice introduction to our session this afternoon. And I hope that our left overcomings are not an obstacle for further discussion or analysis. I'm going to talk about how we at the National Autonomous University of Mexico are dealing with this issue of improving the abilities to promote access to distance education. And I'm going to do it in Spanish. So I'm sorry, I'm going to switch. ¿Podemos empezar? Sí. Muchas gracias. Ahí está. Eso. Ah, pero nada más está acá. ¿Acá no se proyecta? No. Ah, perfecto. Ah, muy bien. Perfecto. Muchas gracias. Entonces, ¿mejor me bajo allí? Acá está. Perfecto. Muchas gracias. No lo había visto. Muchas gracias. Bueno, una forma en la que nosotros en la UNAM hemos tratado de mejorar las condiciones, las habilidades para que nuestros estudiantes tengan mejores posibilidades de ser exitosos en modalidades no presenciales ha sido a través de cursos propedéuticos. SUAYED quiere decir Sistema de Universidad Abierta y Educación a Distancia. Y nada más para ponerlos un poco en contexto, estas son las cifras que manejamos en la UNAM. A nivel licenciatura, esto es las carreras que dan una cierta formación profesional. En el último periodo escolar que terminó, la matrícula fue de alrededor de 187,000 estudiantes, y de esos, un poco menos del 12% están cursando sus estudios en modalidades abierta o a distancia. Abierta presupone cierta semipresencialidad y a distancia es mediada por tecnologías. El perfil del programa propedéutico es justamente esto, que la modalidad a distancia es la única dentro de las modalidades que ofrece la UNAM que para su ingreso requiere que los aspirantes cumplan de manera satisfactoria con un programa propedéutico, y este programa propedéutico se constituye en realidad como un elemento adicional obligatorio previo a su aceptación como alumnos de la universidad, y a través de la cual nosotros pensamos que se mejoran las habilidades de los estudiantes en dos sentidos. El primero, para el manejo de las metodologías de aprendizaje, y el segundo, para el fortalecimiento de las habilidades identificadas de forma genérica para el primer ingreso a los planes y programas de estudio de las licenciaturas en estas modalidades. Esta singularidad caracteriza al programa propedéutico con un doble perfil. Primero, como un requisito de ingreso y como un elemento de apoyo a los aspirantes para adquirir la experiencia en el uso de la metodología de la educación a distancia de la UNAM, que eventualmente ayude a ampliar sus perspectivas de éxito, tanto en su formación profesional como su aplicación inmediata en ambientes del ejercicio laboral. Como antecedentes les cuento que nuestro sistema Universidad Abierta surge en 1972. El año pasado festejamos como la UNED en este año los 40 años de la existencia del SUA, que efectivamente a lo largo de los años y sin modificar sustancialmente sus características de inicio, se ha mantenido como una opción legítima, viable y además deseable para un porcentaje de la población con aspiraciones de educación superior o de hacer una segunda carrera en educación superior, en la UNAM. Desde entonces nosotros hemos venido posibilitando, digamos, nuevas opciones, transitando por nuevas avenidas que con el advenimiento de las tecnologías nos han permitido entonces transformar lo que inicialmente fue el SUA, el Sistema Universidad Abierta, en el SUAYED, Sistema Universidad Abierta y Educación a Distancia. Y en este sistema lo que tenemos es un conjunto de divisiones que, viniendo de una universidad fundamentalmente presencial, lo que tenemos es que en cada escuela y facultad haya posibilidades de estudiar en diferentes modalidades y entonces los docentes de participar en estas diferentes modalidades. De esta suerte, nosotros tenemos entonces un conjunto de divisiones del SUAYED en cada escuela y facultad. Tenemos también un cuerpo colegiado que es el que norma, el que regula y el que vigila la calidad de estos planes y programas educativos, y tenemos una instancia central que es la que fomenta, que es la que yo me honro en dirigir, la que fomenta la permeabilización, digamos, de estas nuevas modalidades educativas en una universidad que tiene ya más de 100 años de existencia. Entonces, en un principio, cada una de estas divisiones, en función de las especificidades de sus disciplinas, empezó a trabajar con cursos de inducción que se fueron diversificando en el tiempo y que en realidad atendían justamente a las especificidades disciplinarias de cada una de ellas. No obstante, dada la diversidad de propuestas para estos cursos de inducción, en 1998 se decidió que con la colaboración de estas escuelas y facultades se diseñara un solo curso de introducción al sistema Universidad Abierta con metodologías justamente de educación abierta, incluyendo la edición de materiales de apoyo y también incluyendo recursos de comunicación a distancia disponibles en ese entonces. Este curso fue modificado paulatinamente de acuerdo a los requerimientos de cada disciplina, de tal forma que se propuso una estructura dividida en dos segmentos, una con contenidos comunes a la metodología, organizada justamente por la coordinación que yo dirijo, y otra con contenidos particulares diseñados por cada una de las divisiones. Sin embargo, ya con la incorporación formal institucional de las tecnologías y de la educación a distancia, este curso se tuvo que modificar y en el 2004 se emitió una convocatoria de ingreso a nivel licenciatura, con lo que se dio apertura plena a la modalidad a distancia dentro de la UNAM y con lo que el curso de introducción fue modificado para dar cabida a un programa propedéutico para el sistema Universidad Abierta y Educación a Distancia. Este programa propedéutico se estableció institucionalmente ya de manera formal en el año 2004 y desde entonces se ha actualizado de manera permanente. En cada una de sus versiones, el material didáctico presentó características diferentes que, no obstante, procuraron el planteamiento de una metodología adecuada para la educación a distancia, en tanto se recuperaban la existencia generada desde por lo menos el 94, como les comentaba yo antes, y que en su fortalecimiento se logró que en el año 2009 se les dotara de un estatus obligatorio, con lo que se normó su personalidad jurídica exclusivamente dentro de la metodología de la educación a distancia. En la actualidad, vemos al programa propedéutico como una estrategia institucional para el aseguramiento de la calidad educativa universitaria En tanto, se procura vincular las expectativas de los estudiantes ante su formación profesional a distancia con la experiencia en el manejo de recursos de comunicación accesibles, fundamentalmente en línea. Esto le ha permitido constituirse en un elemento que enfatiza el apoyo metodológico para una sólida incursión en la formación profesional, menos que como un requisito de selección para el ingreso a estudios universitarios. Por otro lado, ha resultado evidente que este programa propedéutico ha constituido una oportunidad innovadora para la atención inicial de comunidades tradicionalmente desfavorecidas en la oferta de estudios universitarios, por lo que pensamos que entra muy bien como respuesta al título, al moto de este Congreso Internacional de la Justicia Social y de la Innovación, con lo que se ha repercutido en una paulatina transformación social en la que los centros de atención educativa convocan a personas que radican no solamente en la localidad en donde hay campus universitarios, sino en localidades periféricas y distantes. La cobertura del programa propedéutico alcanza hoy en día a 9 entidades federativas de la República Mexicana y tenemos 25 centros en donde participan 9 escuelas y facultades de la UNAM. A través de este programa propedéutico se ha atendido en el lapso de un poco más de 5 años una demanda de 25,000 personas quienes han tenido ya una experiencia de educación universitaria a distancia, misma que ha repercutido en su vida personal de diversas maneras, fundamentalmente porque se ha incursionado no solamente en los beneficios de una modalidad de comunicación educativa inédita en muchas comunidades donde radican los estudiantes, sino también a conocimientos útiles para su vinculación social, tanto en escenarios locales como globales. La más reciente versión del programa propedéutico, que se impartió en diciembre del año pasado, consideró el perfil genérico de ingreso a los planes y programas de estudio de las licenciaturas que se ofrecen a distancia en la UNAM y que se expresó en la identificación de 10 actitudes y habilidades, que son las que ustedes ven ahí en la lámina, que es capacidad de lectura, compromiso con el proceso de aprendizaje propio individual, manejo de estrategias de aprendizaje, capacidad de expresión escrita, capacidad de trabajo en equipo, capacidad de análisis y síntesis, aptitud para relacionarse social y culturalmente, capacidad para la investigación documental y de campo, habilidad en el uso de tecnologías y habilidades para el estudio independiente. Estas actitudes y habilidades guiaron la organización de contenidos y la planeación didáctica en 5 grandes módulos que se ofrecieron en 50 horas. Estos son los módulos: comunicación a distancia y autorregulación, comprensión de textos, argumentación, debate y toma de decisiones y estructura del discurso. Cada módulo se organiza con una introducción, objetivos de aprendizaje, temática y contenidos. Algunos de ellos incluyen documentos de lectura o de trabajo como soportes para la realización de las actividades de aprendizaje, y estas actividades además pues son desde luego evaluadas de manera permanente. Para cada módulo se asigna un profesor quien apoya el proceso de aprendizaje y permanece atento a las necesidades académicas de los estudiantes o de los aspirantes a ser estudiantes. El docente en línea revisa y comenta las actividades de aprendizaje hasta asignarles una calificación final. El profesor en línea es, pues, el principal interlocutor en esta experiencia académica, por lo que se sugiere atender sus indicaciones y acudir a él a través del correo electrónico o de los diferentes foros o vías de comunicación y de mensajería que tiene la plataforma. La metodología para cursar estos módulos permite que los aspirantes se inscriban de manera automática al primero de ellos, y a partir del segundo los estudiantes pueden elegir el módulo a cursar, de tal forma que esto amplía la cultura de la autodeterminación en la secuencia de los módulos, lo cual además nos permite ir introduciendo estos temas de la autorregulación, del autoaprendizaje y que los estudiantes vayan midiendo sus tiempos y aprendiendo a organizarlos. Una de las primeras experiencias educativas que se tienen con el programa propedéutico y que repercuten socialmente es la comunicación que se establece entre los estudiantes que radican en diferentes regiones del país al organizarse en grupos heterogéneos que intercambian desde modalidades en el uso del lenguaje hasta visiones del mundo que enriquecen el diálogo y trascienden los espacios educativos. Estos son la valoración de los estudiantes que cursaron los últimos propedéuticos en una escala de Likert, en donde en realidad los números no son otra cosa, son unidades, desde el totalmente en desacuerdo hasta el totalmente de acuerdo o favorable. Entonces tenemos me parece que una bastante buena evaluación. Quizás en comunicación permanente tenemos que poner una mayor atención, pero llamo su atención a las tres últimas columnas de la derecha, en donde están las valoraciones de los estudiantes sobre su propio, no sobre los materiales y sobre el curso, sino sobre la manera en la que ellos se apropiaron de los conocimientos y de los recursos para fomentarlo. Uno de ellos es la automotivación, el segundo es la autorregulación y el tercero es la autoevaluación, y la verdad es que estamos bastante satisfechos con estos resultados. El programa propedéutico pretende entonces seguir respondiendo a la exigencia cada vez más aguda de potenciar la riqueza que significa disponer de un número creciente de aspirantes a ingresar al SUAYED de la UNAM, y con esto nosotros pensamos que tenemos mejores posibilidades de hacer de la educación superior una realidad para grandes sectores de la población que tradicionalmente han sido excluidos de ella. Muchas gracias.
So, Dr. Zubieta, thank you very much indeed. I noticed that one of the skills, one of the competencies your program seeks to development is students' time management. I'm absolutely confident that they must be extremely successful because they have a perfect model. You were almost exactly 15 minutes. So I'd now like to invite our next speaker, Professor Francesc Pedró, to address you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak in Spanish. That's okay? Okay. Buenas tardes. En primer lugar, querría agradecer una vez más a los organizadores y singularmente a la UNED la oportunidad que me brindan de estar de nuevo aquí. Esta es para mí mi alma mater. Yo salí de esta universidad con el doctorado y fue aquí también donde inicié mi carrera académica, por lo cual volver aquí es siempre un gran placer. Por tanto, muchas gracias. Dicho esto, yo vengo a hablarles de un tema un tanto prosaico, pero enseguida entenderán por qué. Hace 2 años, la Unión Internacional de Telecomunicaciones, ITU, y la UNESCO decidieron crear un grupo de trabajo sobre la banda ancha y la educación, basándose en la presunción de que buena parte de las discusiones que la propia UNESCO viene propiciando acerca de la importancia de la enseñanza abierta y a distancia, por una parte, de los recursos educativos abiertos, por otra, y en tercer y no en último lugar, del aprendizaje móvil, bueno, pues había de una u otra forma un agujero importante que cubrir, que era el agujero precisamente de los canales por los cuales estas actividades deben transitar. Y esto es fundamentalmente la banda ancha. Les parecerá un poco extraño que una persona como ustedes viene repitiendo desde hace prácticamente décadas que no hay que poner el carro delante de los bueyes. No sé cómo van a traducir esto en inglés, Bueno, pero se entiende, ¿no? Es decir, que no hay que poner la tecnología por delante, y estamos hartos de escuchar a los vendedores de tecnología, en el sentido más amplio del término, ¿no? Que vienen a explicarnos, miren, acaba de salir esto, fíjense lo bonito que podría hacer esto otro y demás. En realidad nosotros pensamos, estamos convencidos que por encima de todo tiene que haber una pedagogía, ¿verdad? Y tiene que haber una realización clara de cuáles son las necesidades de los usuarios a los que queremos atender. Todo esto estamos todos de acuerdo, pero yo vengo aquí hoy con un mensaje muy claro, y solo con uno. Miren, en el siglo XXI no podemos avanzar ni en educación abierta a distancia, ni en recursos educativos abiertos, ni en aprendizaje móvil, si no contamos con la banda ancha. Este es el mensaje que vengo a compartir con ustedes. El informe está disponible, yo se lo entregué a los organizadores y me imagino que en unos días, si no lo está ya, estará disponible también para el acceso libre a través de la sede del sitio de la conferencia. El informe se presentó la pasada semana durante el Congreso Mundial de Telefonía Móvil en Barcelona, precisamente por su interés. Entonces, lo que hace este informe, muy brevemente, es ofrecer una visión de aquello que podríamos decir, sabemos que funciona en materia de utilización de la banda ancha en educación y, sobre todo, intenta marcar una dirección clara para los que toman las decisiones, recordándoles siempre que en el ámbito de la discusión acerca de las políticas tecnológicas en educación es importante contar con la banda ancha. ¿Por qué? Bien, viniendo de UNESCO, ustedes se pueden imaginar que yo vengo con una agenda muy clara en este sentido. UNESCO es una organización global, nos interesan todos los mundos, nos interesan todos los niveles educativos, pero tenemos nuestras prioridades. Y nuestras prioridades están básicamente focalizadas en un continente, y ese continente es África. En ese ámbito concreto, nuestras necesidades son extremadamente urgentes. Les quiero recordar que en el año 2015 se debería cerrar el ciclo de la educación para todos, un proceso que se inició 15 años atrás y en el cual esperaríamos haber visto, lógicamente, la realización de una serie de objetivos educativos extremadamente importantes. Sin embargo, la realidad es muy tozuda y aún hoy tenemos todavía, hoy, 2013, 61 millones de niños que deberían estar en la escuela primaria, no lo están. Y a estos hay que añadir unos cuantos millones más en el caso de la enseñanza secundaria. Para poder realizar nuestro objetivo de educación para todos, necesitaríamos ya, mañana mismo, 1.700.000 docentes más, que no están. Y eso solo para conseguir la educación primaria universal en el 2015. 1,7 millones de docentes. No es solo una cuestión que tiene que ver con las escuelas. A día de hoy seguimos teniendo casi 800 millones de analfabetos en el mundo. Y lo que es más importante y con frecuencia se olvida, 2/3 de estas personas son mujeres. Esto explica por qué, junto a la prioridad África, la segunda prioridad para UNESCO en el ámbito de educación es precisamente el empoderamiento de las chicas y de las mujeres. Yo no les voy a aburrir explicándoles cuáles son las enormes ventajas que la banda ancha puede traer a la educación. En la presentación y en el texto aparecen debidamente reseñadas. Lo que es importante en este sentido es recordar 3 elementos clave. El primero es que, por decirlo en negativo, sin banda ancha no podremos promover el desarrollo educativo más allá de donde estamos. Segundo elemento importante también es que no solo necesitamos la banda ancha para hacer lo que sabemos que hay que hacer, sino que la necesitamos también porque esa banda ancha posibilita hacer cosas bien distintas a las que conocemos. Es muy posible que los sistemas escolares o los sistemas educativos a la forma industrial que nos educaron a nosotros nos sirvan para resolver los enormes desafíos que tenemos en el siglo XXI en estas áreas de prioridad. Y ciertamente la banda ancha por sí no transformará nada, pero sin ella es difícil que podamos pensar en una transformación radical de la educación en la cual la educación abierta y a distancia o los recursos educativos abiertos puedan jugar un papel crucial. Pero para realizar esto necesitamos un entorno político realmente comprensivo, en el cual se consideren todos los elementos. Vivimos en la era del conocimiento, y en esta era del conocimiento el recurso a la tecnología no es opcional, es obligatorio. ¿Dónde estamos? Bueno, la verdad sea dicha es que, como todo en la vida, hay grandes disparidades, ¿no? Por una parte, ustedes pueden ver tranquilamente en esta transparencia hasta qué punto, por ejemplo, más del 90% de los estudiantes de 15 años de edad en la OCDE tienen acceso en su casa, dejando de lado las escuelas, a ordenadores conectados a Internet, mientras que esto solo ocurre en un 20% de los casos en los países en vías de desarrollo. Además, no es solo estar o no estar conectado, hay otro dato que también es muy importante. En Europa, por ejemplo, por término medio, en el año 2011, que es el último dato que puedo compartir con ustedes, la media en términos de velocidad de conexión era de 90.000 bits por segundo. Realmente es una banda ancha considerable. En África, la cifra equivalente, les recuerdo, 90.000 bits por segundo. En África, la media de quienes están conectados, que no son todos, es solo de 2.000 bits por segundo. Por consiguiente, bueno, puede ser que exista la conexión, pero lógicamente lo que se puede hacer con ella es muy distinta. Ciertamente hay signos de progreso que son muy importantes. Miren, no hace mucho, hace escasamente 15 días, celebramos en París la Semana de la UNESCO del aprendizaje móvil. Y en esa semana una de las muchas cosas que pudimos escuchar fue a los expertos, en esta ocasión de tecnología, decirnos que, recuerden que la sede central de la UNESCO está en París, decirnos que es mucho más fácil, si se tiene la voluntad política, desarrollar la banda ancha en África que en la propia ciudad de París, donde los edificios son antiguos y las infraestructuras son realmente difíciles. De hecho, a pesar de esa facilidad teórica, en realidad en el mundo en desarrollo solo contamos con un 5% de la población que tenga acceso a algo parecido a una banda ancha. Uno puede preguntarse en este contexto si realmente esperamos que los países en vías de desarrollo sigan exactamente los mismos canales en términos de adopción de la tecnología que nosotros hemos conocido. La realidad a veces nos supera y puede ser perfectamente que este sea el caso con lo que podríamos llamar las tecnologías móviles. Miren, les voy a dar 3 datos también que son extremadamente significativos. En términos de telefonía móvil o telefonía celular, en el año 1995 había en África, en el conjunto del continente, 600.000 suscripciones, 600.000 líneas. 10 años después, en el año 2005, 10 años después, pasaron de 600.000 a 87 millones. Lo digo otra vez, de 60.000 a 87 millones. En el año 2005. Hoy, el último dato disponible de la Unión Internacional de Telecomunicaciones nos dice que hay 735 millones de personas con esa conexión. Desde luego, esto es muy prometedor y podemos imaginarnos, lógicamente, que la banda ancha puede ayudarnos en 4 sentidos distintos, que son los que vienen referenciados precisamente en el informe. Quizá me gustaría destacar en particular 2 que en el contexto del desarrollo son especialmente significativas y son las 2 últimas que aparecen en esta transparencia. El favorecer el despegue del aprendizaje móvil, que no es tan solo el aprendizaje a través del teléfono celular, sino que es el aprendizaje por medio de dispositivos que son móviles, y en segundo lugar, ejercer realmente de, podríamos decir, motor para el empoderamiento de mujeres y de chicas. Yo creo que con estas, de una u otra forma, con estas 2 razones nos bastaría, pero cabe recordar, y esa es la experiencia de muchos de los países que están representados aquí, que la banda ancha ha hecho posible muchos desarrollos realmente innovadores en el ámbito del apoyo a los docentes y en el ámbito igualmente del apoyo a los alumnos, ¿no? En términos de agenda política, lógicamente los países reconocen en sus discursos la importancia que la banda ancha tiene, pero vemos pocos desarrollos todavía. Y vemos pocos desarrollos porque con frecuencia el sector educativo, y ese somos precisamente nosotros, se resiste a pensar que conviene unir fuerzas precisamente con los promotores de esa conectividad y de esa tecnología. Y eso es precisamente lo que necesitamos. Nosotros necesitamos, y esas son quizá las 6 recomendaciones básicas que se encuentran en este informe, necesitamos básicamente que ocurran 6 cosas. La primera, necesitamos, y ese es el principal mensaje con el que vine y con el que me quiero retirar, aumentar el acceso a la tecnología, y hoy por hoy la tecnología ya no es una cuestión de equipamientos, no es una cuestión de dispositivos, es fundamentalmente una cuestión de conectividad. En segundo lugar, necesitamos aprovechar el potencial de esa tecnología y singularmente de la banda ancha, empezando por los niveles universitarios, pero bajando también a los niveles de la formación profesional y de la formación profesional continua, para que precisamente ese potencial educativo se desarrolle. Para hacerlo posible, necesitamos algo que hemos visto en la primera presentación y también esta mañana. Necesitamos tener la certeza de que todos los docentes, pero también los alumnos, son capaces de desarrollar esas competencias sin las cuales no pueden aprovechar ese potencial. No les puede extrañar, en cuarto lugar, que viniendo de la UNESCO y de la Unión Internacional de Comunicaciones sigamos insistiendo en que para los países en desarrollo existe una ventana de oportunidad no solo con los recursos educativos abiertos, sino todavía más aún, o en combinación con ellos, con el aprendizaje móvil. Para que esto sea una realidad y no sea meramente una nueva imposición colonial de culturas o de contenidos, necesitamos apoyar todos los esfuerzos que se realizan para que esos contenidos que circulan sean perfectamente comprensibles en el contexto local, cuando no sean desarrollados en ese propio contexto, adaptados a ese contexto y, por supuesto, distribuidos en las lenguas locales. Y finalmente, necesitamos una vez más incrementar nuestro compromiso y reiterar nuestro compromiso, el de las agencias de Naciones Unidas, con la lucha a favor de la desaparición de lo que podríamos llamar la división, la separación tecnológica que existe entre países desarrollados y países en vías de desarrollo. Para eso, ustedes pueden pensar que esto no tiene nada que ver con ustedes, que ustedes están en otro elemento de la ecuación, que eso solo es una discusión estrictamente política. Miren, hoy en día, en el año 2013, hemos visto que precisamente que los desarrollos más favorables que se han dado en los países en los que vemos realmente esos ejemplos son el resultado de lo que llamamos partenariados entre agentes múltiples. Es decir, necesitamos contar no solo con las instituciones y con los gobiernos, esa era la visión tradicional que teníamos en el siglo XX, sino que necesitamos también contar con la iniciativa privada, necesitamos también sentarnos con los proveedores de tecnología. Yo creo que para eso ustedes saben siempre que pueden contar con la UNESCO. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Professor Pedró. We've now had a fascinating insight into the way in which we can use open and distance learning to open up access to a leading conventional, traditional university and the role of broadband in promoting access, particularly across the developing world. It's now my great pleasure to ask Professor Mandla Makanya to come up and make his presentation.
Program Director, thank you very much. I'll apologize first of all about my voice because from flying I seem to be catching some flu, but I will survive. My fellow presenters, together with the Program Director, I'll be talking about the work of our university here. It's UNISA in the south of the continent of Africa. The university was established in 1873, at that stage as the University of the Cape of Good Hope, because it was established in Cape Town. It has undergone a number of transformations, fundamentally from 1916 onwards, where it changed its name to become a University of South Africa, and in 1946 in particular, where it chose for itself to do distance education. It was battling in this particular area for some years as a correspondence university, but then began to do work in a much better way, particularly from the 90s onwards. So there's been a lot of investment that we've been making at this stage on the technologies in order to make the kind of advances that will make sense for the future of where we should be going. Now, as a university, we understand our role in the specific context of our university, that we need to have a common understanding of how the curricula offered by the university should respond to globalization, internationalization, national development objectives and the skills shortage, and to the broader issues faced by humanity, namely international and regional conflicts, poverty, sustainability, corruption, health priorities and pandemics, economic sustainability, environmental concerns, and living in an increasingly complex and fast-changing world. As no education is neutral, UNISA will critically and creatively explore its own unique contributions to seeking solutions to the challenges facing communities on our continent without losing sight of the impact of the internationalization and globalization on curricula and the skills required of our graduates. UNISA aims to achieve a balance that allows business as usual while moving deliberately and incrementally to a new open distance and e-learning business model. That balance will emanate from the judicious alignment and synergy of three competencies which I've been promoting at UNISA since I took over as a leader 2 years ago. This namely agility, collaboration, and performance. In pursuit of that balance, key areas receiving attention include the following: the rationalization of our program qualification mix for greater viability and efficiency, an ongoing interrogation of graduateness ICT skills for students, student support, especially online. This year we've introduced e-tutoring system, for instance. Migration to blended and online learning, including assessment. Change in higher education and the need for new business models. Changes in policy and regulatory environment, with South Africa's National Development Plan as the main driver. The development plan was adopted by our government last year, and it has a trajectory of 30 years for us, to pursue the current developments that have taken place in the global West in order to influence the kinds of developments and growth that we are supposed to be experiencing within our own environment. The changing demography, especially race, class, gender, and technological orientation. The changed technological environment. The management and leadership for the digital era in the context of organizational complexity, cooperative and interdependent rather than competitive. An alignment of open distance learning business strategy and ICT to bring ICT to leading edge open distance learning, currently working on our organizational architecture in order to get all our systems aligned in order to perform for the better. Now, with that background, I would like to look at two innovations in our environment, that is in teaching and learning, as well as our articulation of graduateness as we prepare our students for successful access to the labor market. We accept that all of our students needed to be prepared equally for the digital world and the labor market. To that end, we've introduced the Signature Curriculum Program, which serves as a first concerted effort by UNISA to move towards state-of-the-art online teaching and learning. The focus has been on curriculum design for online learning, student support in terms of online learning and assessment in an online environment. Current registration numbers suggest that, contrary to most predictions, students registered for the signature courses in large numbers, to our surprise as well. A total of 93,693 students have registered for the online courses. Special reference should be made to the module on ethical ICTs for development solutions, with registered 20,149 students, and other courses included language through an African lens, being a professional teacher, environmental awareness and responsibility, social dimensions of justice, and sustainability and greed. So I think looking at these closely, the language through an African lens in the College of Human Sciences, mainly by social scientists, being a professional teacher from the College of Education, environmental awareness and responsibility from our College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, social dimensions of justice from our College of Law, and then sustainability and greed from our College of Economic and Management Sciences. Now, the achievements that we've at least experienced thus far, that an average of 87% of all our students registered for the modules have already gone online to participate in the online activities. Once the students manage to navigate the MyUNISA platform, they respond very positively to the courses. Expressions such as the following are regularly used: amazing, interesting, stimulating, fresh, and innovative. A clear change in study method is already becoming visible. In the online discussion forum, students in all modules report that they've been surprised to discover that they could not simply go to their assignments and answer the questions. Instead, they had to work through the relevant learning units and participate in various activities first. Some students see this as very exciting, while others think that the signature courses will require more from them than ordinary UNISA courses. And as you know, students actually want easier things than to work hard. Seeing that UNISA students are grouped in the groups of 30, plagiarism is easily detected by fellow students, teaching assistants that we've employed, strictly speaking, to support us in this endeavor, and our lecturers. The result is that many students confess that I have to think for myself instead of repeating what other students say. While there was some plagiarism during our first round of assignments, which we do in cycles of 2 weeks, such instances have dropped dramatically. Now, the challenges that we have experienced is that despite broad information and communication around the courses, some students still complain that they did not realize that they have registered for online module. Hence, they sit and wait for UNISA to send them study material. Although even when we've indicated clearly that the DigiBand is a mere copy of the online course, students seem to think that they cannot start working until they have received these bands. To resolve the confusion, various forms of communication will be used consistently to ensure that the message is understood, although our students have actually been contesting this over time. Students are flocking to our UNISA regional centers, which are spread across the country, as well as in Ethiopia, outside South Africa, to get access to computers and the internet. Reports from regional staff focus on 3 challenges that are raised here: shortage of computers, lack of internet bandwidth, and lack of human capacity to address student needs. This has been brought to the attention of Regional Head Tuition and Facilitation of Learning and ICT, who will attend to these needs as a matter of agency. But we've also held a workshop just to try and understand how many of these problems can actually be obviated. Now, DigiBands, in our view, this is our innovative solution as an institution. Students with restricted or no internet access are provided the facility by means of DigiBands or digital bracelets to work offline and only go online at intervals to upload their work onto the MyUNISA platform. Due to the limited bandwidth in regional offices, the DigiBands also allow students at regional centers to work offline and only go online at intervals, thereby reducing the pressure in terms of bandwidth demands. As is the case with any innovation, the challenges come to the fore in its use. In our case, a lack of appropriate quality assurance on the part of the supplier resulted in some faulty DigiBands, which has already been resolved, but it caused a delay in their delivery. That was at the beginning of the year, so we had a delay of more or less 2 weeks. The signature course team went out of its way to use only the material under Creative Commons licensing in designing the courses. However, during the January 2013, our library advised us that the licensing criteria of some of the videos had changed since downloading. As a result, some videos had to be removed from the DigiBands, which added to the delay in dispatching them to the students. The matter is receiving attention, but it implies the need for circumspection when using OERs for our open distance learning. The consequences for an institution the size of UNISA, with more or less 400,000 students, could be significant, as has already been demonstrated. As with any new device, it has taken both staff and students some time to become familiar with the operation of the device. To facilitate its efficient and confident use, DigiBand guidelines have been developed and made available to UNISA inquiry staff and students so that they can respond without having to revert to the institution for support. Now, we've employed teaching assistants. A total of 192 teaching assistant contracts have been activated, the majority of whom are doing excellent work, I can say. They have provided our lecturers with invaluable support. A number of measures have been put in place to get inactive TAs to the required level of performance, because, as you know, some of them have been battling to actually understand the role that we expect, from them, because it's fairly new, it's just introduced this year. The student feedback on teaching assistants has been absolutely excellent, whereas students initially said that UNISA is robbing them of their money. When they did not receive their printed guides, they now report that this does not feel like distance education at all, because they have a personal touch with their teachers, with this ongoing interaction, and as I indicated, testing their understanding and knowledge of the work every 2 weeks. Teaching assistant appointments are proving to be a challenge in terms of interdependence with human resources and institutional rhythms, and this has caused backlogs and delays in appointments. Normally, our policies in appointments obviously did not at least help us in appointing these teaching assistants, because we had to move at a high speed. The manner in which we actually have to recognize their work and so on is not in the context of staff that we've always been employing as a university. And of course, it has created numerous challenges. But let me say that we've done some tweaking of our systems to obviate delays in appointments. We had to test the system. It's now beginning to work very well. Now, the current student system, obviously, is very difficult to link these teaching assistants to student groups automatically, which also has caused some delays. But we're working on a plan now to shed the current student system. We're making a huge investment in order to come up with a new student system altogether that will be in place by 2015, and it will obviate a number of the problems that we're currently experiencing. Now, with the ICT matters, the interrelatedness of our drive towards increased online teaching and learning and the establishment of ICT infrastructure and resources to support this drive cannot be overemphasized. In this regard, ICT staff has been rendering the most excellent service to our signature course project, and it will have been impossible to launch the initiative without their continued involvement. This demonstrates an overall commitment on the part of the university to adopt a team approach. In this transition phase, UNISA and ICT network is slow, causing some frustration in the use of gradebook tool on MyUNISA, but obviously our ICT staff are consistently looking at better ways of handling the process. And we feel that at this point, we will be in a better position to begin, obviously, evangelizing on the E that is linked to open distance learning, so that we argue that at the same time, people should not just see the E as a panacea, for higher education woes, but we need to understand that while undoubtedly it has a major role to play in accommodating the massification of higher education, it will not come cheaply or easy. We've looked at the investments that we have to make as a university. At this stage, it's actually going closer to R1 billion South African rands. That's an investment that just a university alone has made in this regard. Now, when it comes to our graduates, we are very keen to ensure that by the time they complete their studies, they must be ICT savvy, so that when they get to the world of work, they can be in a position to maneuver there without having to struggle. Now, in terms then of the skills that are required here, we need to say that they must function locally, nationally, but also function as global citizens. In this case, to have a critical understanding of their location within the African continent with its histories, challenges, and potential. To be able to critically analyze and evaluate the credibility and usefulness of information and data, to know how to apply their specific, discipline-specific knowledges competently, ethically, and creatively to solve real-life situations, and being ethically aware of their learning and developmental needs, for the future potential of what the world of work requires. Now, to conclude, it is in this context that a more complete knowledge and understanding of our students and their capacities, capabilities, and circumstances will assist in informing curriculum development and learner support in such a manner as to cater for the greater diversity and achieve greater success. We believe we are well into that process as we challenge both our students and ourselves with innovative courses and increasing ICT sophistication. Further, a more comprehensive understanding of who it is that we are teaching will enable us to formulate definitions and articulations of graduateness that incorporate more accurately the lived reality of our students. Here too we are making progress, and student profiling and surveying is assuming a greater priority in our institutional research. Ultimately, this should be offering a more appropriate balance between our aims and aspirations for our students and the reality of what they are able to bring to the table in pursuit of that end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Makanya. I have to tell you that as you were describing some of the HR issues that you faced with your teaching assistants, I felt I was right back to the many hours I spent on the other side of the negotiating table working with the teaching unions at the UK Open University trying to make changes to our part-time staff contracts. So it's very familiar, these practical issues, and actually resolving them is critical in making the strides that you've obviously made. So I'm now delighted to introduce our final speaker, Professor Grace Alfonso.
Thank you very much, Professor Will. And I'd like to thank UNED for inviting me over, and to everyone a pleasant good afternoon. We are now part of technologically networked societies. As universities respond to these changes, we see a world movement towards openness, not only within open and distance education institutions, but in institutional pillars of traditional residential universities as they perform their core functions of instruction, research, and extension. While openness has become a byword, the rise of the digital societies has yielded a number of challenges we cannot afford to ignore. To provide some context to my presentation, I would like to say that I am from UP Open University, UPOU for short. It is the 5th constituent university of the University of the Philippines system, which has been around for 100 years. It has adopted open and distance e-learning both as an institutional and educational philosophy. And UP Open University has chosen to deliver its courses 100% online. When the university went into online learning in 2001, it did not see the web-based innovations as a passing fancy, but more of a way to increase the interactivity of its courses, expose its students to a more diverse range of perspectives, and promote the co-creation of knowledge. We are basically a graduate university. 70% of our students are graduate students, and they are dispersed in more than 40 countries all over the world. 11 years after our adoption of online learning, we established a forum where the convergence of open learning, distance education, and e-learning can be discussed and this happened in 2012. And the UPOU organized the first international conference on open and distance e-learning, or ICODEL, which was attended by close to 300 delegates from 20 countries, and over 100 institutions and organizations were represented. I share these experiences with you in this forum because it may give us some insights on our topic today, mobilizing higher education for social justice in a digitized world through open and distance e-learning. Access, social justice, and openness are interrelated ideas. But how do we view openness in a digitized world? For most of us, the concept of openness in education has mainly focused on the following standard areas: openness in admission, openness in accreditation, openness in delivery modes, openness in cost, openness in choosing one's educational track, openness in course design and evaluation. Today, in a digitized world, we tend to look at these additional aspects as standards of openness. Openness and open source learning management systems, open textbooks combination, and resource-based packages, participation in open educational resources, OER movement, and participation in Creative Commons. And our increasing networked world prevents us from ignoring the second set of standards. The expanded idea of openness very much tied up with how we use web-based technologies, not just to transmit knowledge, but as Mott and Wiley argued, promote learner autonomy by employing new learning methodologies. In a digital age, the idea of openness has centered on open educational resources and massive open online courses, or MOOCs. Most of the initiatives in these areas were spearheaded by conventional universities. The ODL institutions have been somewhat overtaken by traditional universities in this area. While MOOCs have helped increase access to education, particularly in developing countries, as Tony Bates argued, that the fact that most of the universities would not credit the award degrees of this type of program makes the impact of the Coursera-like MOOCs very limited. ODL institutions have not been exactly uninvolved in these areas. The OER University has been committed to creating flexible pathways of OER learners to gain formal academic credit. The European Association of Distance Teaching Universities is pushing for European MOOC-like platforms in this year's conference of EADTU. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I think you will be discussing a transition of open and online education in European universities. At the UPOU, our talks are currently underway for the creation of open online courses to serve the needs of our workforce. We are collaborating with UNED for the development of open online courses in e-teaching of Spanish. And a law has been passed in our country to teach a third language in our basic education. So likewise, the UPOU Professional Continuing Education Program is about to develop the MOOC-like model courses, mobile applications, technopreneurship, and service management to address the rapidly increasing demand for talent of our burgeoning business process outsourcing sector. But just like our counterparts in Europe, we are aware of the issues surrounding around the present-day MOOCs and are thinking of ways on how to deliver our OOCs under the concept of MODEL, or massive open and distance e-learning. Open universities share with MOOCs and OER movements a common social goal: to make quality education more accessible to more people. The full potential of OER and MOOCs can only be realized through the judicious application of e-learning. E-learning does not exist in a vacuum. It is influenced by a host of social, cultural, political, and economic factors. The confluence of these factors help define what kind of e-learning will prevail. There are some contending issues that e-learning needs to address. While open online courses can be tapped for labor skills development, the rush to meet the demand for so-called skill-based courses may lead to myopic programs that do not go beyond the how-tos of things, and may also mute marginalized perspectives that do not lend themselves well to digital representation. Standardized quality assurance systems can ensure uniformity of student experience, but they can also impinge on the academic freedom of faculty members. How do open, distance, and e-learning institutions hold on to their mission of social justice in the midst of these changes? Aside from getting inspiration from ODL's inherent public service, access, and equity, we need to look at e-learning within the context of the Universitas, the larger community of scholars, the state that has given us the mandate to operate, as well as the citizenry from which we draw support. By going back to the concept of the Universitas, we can better appreciate what education is, regardless of mode of delivery, a social contract. At the core of university social contract is its role in social transformation for social justice. For the online learning communities to be genuinely transformational, we need to revisit values that have made the Universitas a cradle for social transformation: academic freedom, humanism, intellectual pluralism, academic excellence, democracy, and service to society. Open and distance learning, or ODEL, as you can see in our screen, draws from the features and affordances provided by open learning, distance education, and e-learning: access and equity, resource sharing, learner-centeredness, flexibility, active learning, interactivity, ubiquity, and connectivity. Together, all these elements are embedded and facilitated by networked information and communication technologies and make up what we refer to as open and distance e-learning, or ODEL. By going back to the concept of the Universitas, we can better appreciate what education is. It is a social contract for social justice. For me, ODEL is more of a worldview, a construction of how open learning, distance education, and e-learning can converge and diverge, co-create each other, and enacted in the context of the Universitas. While we continue to reap the benefits of ODEL, there are some issues that I believe we must consider if we are to make ODEL more relevant to learners, particularly in this digitized world. First is the plurality of ideas and respect for cultural diversity. The unending violence from conflicts of nations has shown us that the world needs more people who have greater understanding of the complexities of the world around them, a high level of tolerance of differences, and a more open mind to transformation. These are the same values that define the Universitas. It encourages participation, but also presents a range of ideas and perspectives. The ODEL and the OER movements have gone a great deal in democratizing learning materials. However, the developing world has been more of a consumer rather than a producer of content. To create a truly global perspective, the developing nations like our country must find means to claim our stories, our experiences, and our interpretations in the vast, limitless web. Only then can we talk about authentic contribution. Second is the production of scholarly texts in a networked world. If we really want OERs for ODEL to be truly reliable, academics need to be active in producing, propagating OERs that can be accessed by people across the globe. We also need to disseminate scientific knowledge to an audience that is becoming more accustomed to the grammars of the audiovisual language. In a network society, academics must also partner not only with other academics, but also with communities of learners and practitioners in the production of ODEL courses and OERs. There should be more East-West, East-East, South-South, and North-South collaboration to ensure that these courses may help minimize the problems of racism, caricature portrayals, exoticism, sexism, and fundamentalism that has been plaguing our world. If academics fail to see the opportunities of working with learners and other stakeholders in the educational system, commercial providers will fill the void. The juggernaut of consumerism has its dangers, and we should remain vigilant about it. Third is the non-linearity of the medium. The online environment in which most OERs and ODEL courses are embedded is capable of reconfiguring spaces through the use of hypertext and hypermedia and hypermultimedia. Hypertext brings back the non-linear, non-hierarchical organization of information. Teachers and learners will have to be eloquent in this new technology. ODEL institutions are aware of this non-linearity and hopefully will incorporate it in their design in the versions of their open online courses. Fourth is instilling the Universitas ethos in the electronic environment. When education is limited to acquisition of facts and skills alone, the possibilities of social transformation are hampered. A focus on content transmission does not truly empower the marginalized, but may also contribute to the reification of the existing social structures. In the conventional education, the spirit of Universitas is made manifest in the way classes are conducted, research is undertaken, etc. And how do we then propagate these values in an online environment? How do we redefine the spaces of socialization? And how do we make social networking a tool for the community of scholars? Fifth is addressing the digital and cognitive divide. Just as ICT can be used to reach sectors and are not served by the conventional educational system, it can also marginalize people who do not have access to it or do not know how to engage with it. The developing world needs to improve the ICT infrastructure for the rural and poorer areas by working with governments and the private sector. Lastly is collaboration and partnership of academic institutions. Lastly, the question of who pays is something what universities should not leave solely to the market. There are emerging business models around ODEL, the OERs, and they have an important role to play in this development. Aside from the government funding, we see university partnerships, collaboration like the OER University, as presented by Professor Wayne McIntosh in the last OER in Asia, meet in Wawasan University. Another example of partnership is the OU5, a consortium of 5 ASEAN universities composed of UPOU, Universitas Terbuka, Indonesia, Open University of Malaysia, Sukhothai Thammasat, Open University of Thailand and Hanoi, Open University for Open Educational Materials for a master's program in ASEAN Studies. In addition to these emerging models of partnerships, universities also need to play a stronger role in advocating for public funding of these initiatives. These are indeed exciting times for ODEL, which offers a lot of opportunities of experimentation, innovation, and openness. It is here today and will proliferate more so in the future. We hope to see you in the coming second International Conference in Distance e-Learning, ICODEL, in 2014 in Manila. So to all of you, a good day. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Professor Alfonso, and to all our speakers for a series of thought-provoking, clear, positive, and above all, very practical contributions, which I'm sure will give many of you ideas that you can develop yourself. Now, it is just past 4 o'clock. The schedule says that we're due to have coffee now. However, we were at least 10 minutes late starting, so I'm going to take a risk that you will be prepared to accept 20 minutes for coffee so that we can have about 10 minutes for discussion, and that way we'll be just about on our original schedule. There are many questions that I would love to ask, but I think it's much more important that we invite contributions and questions from you. So you will find that there are 2 gentlemen there and on that side who are holding a microphone. So if you'd like to signal by raising your hand if you want to ask a question, and then wait until the microphone reaches you, if you could then tell us who you are and your institution, and then present your question. So who would like to start? At the front.
Thank you. Alan Tate from the Open University in UK. A number of open universities around the world use the term social justice explicitly in their mission statements. And it's quite clear from our speakers today, and thank you for such an interesting set of presentations, that it is important to you too. I'd like to ask, if I may, for comment from panel members, in particular from our institutional members, our university representatives there, how social justice is discussed in your university. How do you articulate a commitment to social justice within your university in order that you arrive at a set of priorities? Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. So I'm going to start with Professor Macagna. I'll go through our institutional members, and then I'll come to Professor Pedró to ask the question, what is the relevance of his agenda in promoting broadband access to social justice? Professor Macagna.
No, thank you very much. In our case, it's actually informed by ensuring that the students that we admit in the university should be given the maximum opportunities of success. This is defined in the first instance by ensuring that students are not necessarily given a barrier of access to education simply because they do not have their own resources to pay for education. In that case, we make available the funding from the state through the agency of NSFAS so that they can actually access the resources. But those students who qualify have to meet specific criteria, that they must hail from indigent family backgrounds, but must also have the capabilities to succeed, which is obviously determined, by their own marks, at a matric level. We of course accept again that there are challenges that students may be experiencing. Some, because of the environments that they are coming from, will not necessarily be cognitively, ready to make a success of their own studies. And our understanding then is that we must actually make a conducive environment as a university for them to make a success of that, which is partly then the reason why the kinds of investments that we're making in our regional offices across the country are meant to provide the network that students can access freely, but also computers that they can use as and when they do their work and submit their assignments and so on. But then furthermore, there's an understanding from the side of the university that the extent to which the students who then go through the system and make a success of their own studies should come out of the institution with the necessary competencies that will help them to succeed in the world of work, which is the main reason then why currently we've been negotiating, particularly with the mobile firms, to make their mobile instruments available to students, but also ensuring that the kind of broadband that can be shared in this instance is made available. We've taken the responsibility as a university for the logistics so that they don't necessarily have to charge students for that. So we are asking that students pay a once-off, for 6 months so that per semester they are covered for the broadband. So this is meant to cater mainly for students who do not necessarily have the facilities from their own homes, but then can actually access it through that kind of an arrangement. So from the side of the university, the fact that we're making those kinds of investments is part and parcel of ensuring that we're living up, this social justice arrangement. So which is primarily driven by what investments are we making towards ensuring the students succeed.
Thank you. Dr. Zubieta.
Thank you. What is it in Spanish? A pesar de que la UNAM no tiene en su misión formal la justicia social, me parece que está incluida en el mero principio de que la educación es una vía para la justicia social. Nosotros tenemos como las 3 principales funciones de la universidad: la docencia, la investigación y la difusión de la cultura. Y en la parte, en particular de la difusión de la cultura, hoy en día con iniciativas como Creative Commons, estamos tratando de hacer disponible al grueso de la población todo el trabajo que se hace en la universidad. Tenemos un programa que se llama Toda la UNAM en línea,
en donde las tesis y todos los libros, todo el material que se produce en la universidad está a disponibilidad de quien lo quiera consultar. En un principio la universidad atendía fundamentalmente a la población del país, por eso su condición de universidad nacional, en donde se esperaba que la población migrara hacia la Ciudad de México, ya que el principal campus, por no decir el único, se encontraba localizado en la Ciudad de México, la ciudad capital. Sin embargo, con la creación del SUA, del Sistema Universidad Abierto, en 1972, se trató de llegar a nuevos sectores de la población y de esa manera democratizar un poco más el acceso de población que no tenía las posibilidades de asistir de manera regular a la escuela a educación superior. Nuevamente pensando en que la población podía asistir a sesiones presenciales sabatinas. Posteriormente, ahora con las tecnologías y con la educación a distancia, lo que hemos empezado a estructurar es una oferta educativa no solamente de bachillerato y licenciaturas, sino también de educación continua para toda la vida, con base en convenios con gobiernos estatales y municipales. De esa manera garantizamos el acceso de la población a Internet, solicitamos que estos gobiernos se comprometan con dotar la infraestructura tecnológica necesaria para poder acceder a la Internet, y la universidad entonces asume el compromiso de garantizar la calidad de los programas educativos y de los materiales que están ubicados en las diferentes plataformas, servidores que tenemos a disposición de la población. Y por otro lado, también hemos lanzado una iniciativa para atender a la población migrante, mexicana migrante, fundamentalmente hacia los Estados Unidos, y a esa población le estamos dando educación media superior. El bachillerato que nosotros le llamamos, tenemos un programa muy exitoso, ese es totalmente en línea, y de esa manera nosotros pensamos que garantizando una mayor equidad en el acceso a la educación, cumplimos con un compromiso de justicia social.
Thank you. Professor Alfonso.
Am I heard? It's okay. Well, I would like to think that UP Open University, from vision to practice, social justice is always in the mind of the university. Number one, it's highly subsidized by government and very minimal tuition fee, so it is open to a wide range of those who want to really enter it. And at the same time, its mandate is to strengthen the Filipino workforce. As you know, Filipinos are all over the world, and we would like to continue their educational, their access to education. And so by going online, this is the openness, and we are now reaching, as I was saying, all over the world, our Filipino workforce. But at the same time, also in terms of curricular development, our courses are basically not along the usual lines of the traditional universities. Our programs are towards development programs. So we have development communication, we also have what we call as development studies, we have public administration, etc., and so on. So from developing of our curricula to the delivery of our courses, we'd like to think that we're pushing for social justice. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, briefly, if we could, Professor Pedró.
I'd like to be very straightforward. I don't think that there is a clear connection between broadband expansion and social justice. I think that you may think of broadband like an instrument for social equity, meaning by that you provide or address the issue of equal access to an asset or to a particular good or service. But when it comes to social justice, I think that there is a judgment in it, and for many of us, social justice would mean that you deploy policies that intend to give more to those who have less. So when it comes to the use of broadband in education, I mean, just getting access doesn't mean necessarily that you are going to make the best use that talk.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to allow one more question because otherwise you won't get coffee. And I'm going to ask if the question can be quite focused, and I'm going to ask each speaker to make a very, very quick response, and then we'll finish. So is there one more question? Or does everybody want to go for coffee? I think so. Okay, in which case, can I finally thank our really outstanding panel of speakers, and can I ask you to thank them in the usual way and show your appreciation? Yeah, so that was fantastic.
Our moderator, congratulations.
That was a